open my lips, and my mouth shall proclaim your praise. O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall proclaim your praise. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts.
I guess my monastic odyssey goes back quite some years. When I was, when I was in high school, I read Seven Storey Mountain. That was the beginning. Instead of going to college, I only went one semester, and then I went off to join the Trappists in a monastery in Utah, and was there for 5 years. That was 1951 to 56. Those are the good old days. The days of the giants before the Second Vatican Council. But it was a difficult life at that time, and especially for me at such a young age. I was only about 18, and I really hadn't seen much of anything. So they figured that I needed more time to grow up. So I didn't make my solemn vows then. Instead, they suggested I try some more active form of religious life, so I entered the Dominicans, and that was in 57. And lo and behold, 32 years later, here I am, full circle back again in the monastic life. And I suppose it's that first seed that was there. They always say your first love is the strongest, and I think that that was what was in the back of my mind.
Cry out with joy to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him singing for joy. Know that he, the Lord, is God. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts.
Well, many people ask us every so often why we come here, why are we monks, what brought us here. For me, I think it was something that I've wanted for a long time. Ever since I was young, with going to school with the nuns, they kind of instilled, be a religious of some sort. And so I wanted to be a priest for a long time, and I was young anyways. And then I kind of left that idea until I got to high school. And then I found out there was such a thing as a monk and what a monk does, monasteries and things. So from there I started pursuing it little by little. And then after high school, I went to work, and I had to take care of my parents. They were elderly, so I stayed with them, and I worked in a factory. We made magazines. I worked in a bindery, and I stayed there 15 years. But I always had in the back of my mind being a monk and kind of dreaming about it and what a good life it might be for me. So after my parents both passed away, and I was free from that responsibility, and I started looking into the monastic life.
He made us, we belong to him. We are his people, the sheep of his flock. Go within his gates giving thanks. Enter his courts with songs of praise. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts.
Probably the two most formative elements of my own becoming a monk were my grandparents and the California missions. Every year as a youngster, my family would go to California to visit Disneyland. And that's when I first became acquainted with the California missions that are all along the way. And I was fascinated by these buildings, these places, the history behind them. And that's when I first learned about I grew up Catholic, and so that's when I first started learning about another way of living the Catholic life, as the California missions were Franciscan run. And so that influenced me as a young person. The other was my grandparents. They lived about 20 miles from a Benedictine monastery where I was growing up, and they took me there as a youngster, and I remember being so impressed. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I was so impressed by it that I remember at that very young age, whatever it was, 8 or 9 or something, feeling, this is something I would like to do when I grow up. But
give thanks to him and bless his name. Indeed, how good is the Lord! Eternal his merciful love. He is faithful from age to age. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts.
Well, I was looking into monastic life, and I was interested in the prayer life because it comes without the ambience of the secular life. And a life centered totally on Christ seemed the most beneficial to me.
Yeah, I think, I don't remember any conscious decision myself. I just found myself one day, looking at monastic life and visiting monasteries, and I think it had something to do with the fact that I decided interiorly that my spiritual life was really what I valued the most above anything, and this was the place to really develop that, and more so than I could anywhere else. And it's not, I don't see myself as criticizing secular life at all. I think each one has a vocation. Each person has to decide where they can best develop themselves in all phases of life.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. If today you hear his voice, harden not your heart.
When you use the word search, I begin to wonder how that applies to our life. Because for so many people today, they're looking for something, but they don't know what it is. Whereas in our kind of search, it's like we know who is, and that's for whom we search. It's a different kind of search. Our rule, the rule of St. Benedict, asks of the novice, do you truly seek God? And so the search is obviously for God, but what does that mean today? So many people find it difficult to understand who God is, or that there is a God, or how God is involved in the world. For us here, it's I think, based on an already chosen belief. We believe God exists. We believe that He's shown Himself in a particular way in Jesus Christ, and for us, in a particular way in the Catholic Church. And so the search becomes narrowed down immediately from this sort of vast thing, which many of us find people on today, a kind of search that's just looking for meaning, becomes narrowed down from a search for God in Jesus Christ in the Catholic Church. And then I suppose the young people today would ask us, well, what does it mean then to find God and all that? And there we can only refer to inner experience. But for us, it's always an inner experience formed in a tradition, formed in this tradition already described in the Catholic Church, formed in our monastic Benedictine tradition. We start out in the morning with morning prayer at 4 o'clock. These are called vigils because it's in the middle of the night still. And then we have the next prayer at around the time of dawn, which for us is usually around 6 o'clock here. And then we have little hours throughout the day, the 3rd, the 6th, and the 9th hours. And those vary depending on the time of the year. But they break up the day so that we're always coming back to church. And then Vespers in the evening and Compline at night. And then sometime during the day we have the Eucharist, the Mass. The point of this is always to remind the monk to offer everything to God and to consecrate his whole life to God. And Benedict saw it as important that the day be broken. It's for our human frailty, the fact that we forget that there is a God. The fact that we forget that we even believe anything. And so we come back at times during the day to pray.
Well, we came here both on the same day and became postulants. And what that means is that we spend 6 months here and just live the life of a monk. And they really don't put us through any kind of regimen except a couple of classes during the week. But basically to give us a real good taste of the life and, make a decision at the end of that.
Yeah, life is in stages. You first come here as an observer, which can go from any time between 1 week and several months,
Yeah.
and then postulancy, which is 6 months,
Yeah.
and then novitiate, which is 1 year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a ladder that you climb to become a monk, and it's, it depends on the person how long they spend in observership, but the others are pretty well set: 6 months for postulancy, 12 months for novitiate.
The process is to follow what we call the common life, which is a daily schedule, obedience to an abbot, obedience to the brothers of the community, the type of food we eat, the type of work we do. And it's giving oneself totally to that whole process of living in a community with a defined way of life that's already set up and which one doesn't determine by himself. And the basic process is to let go, and in the midst of that then, to begin to be quiet, to be still. So in the process, there are times for prayer, for a common prayer, times for private prayer, times for being alone, times for being together. But it's all arranged, and the basic process is all of it, not just the time for prayer.
From the Rule of Our Holy Father, Saint Benedict, Chapter 48, The Daily Manual Labor. On Sunday, all should give themselves to reading, except those to whom other duties have been assigned. But if anyone is so careless and idle that he is either unwilling or unable to study or read, he must be given some other task so as not to be unemployed. To the brethren who are in poor health or not strong, the work or craft that is allotted should be such as to keep them occupied, but not such as by its weight to break them down or drive them away. Their lack of strength is a matter for the abbot's consideration. From Psalm 30. O Lord, you brought me up from the netherworld. You preserved me from among those going down into the pit. Joseph told his brothers, "Look, I have had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What kind of dream is this that you have had? Shall we indeed come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow to the ground before you?" So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind.
All the trees of the wood shall for joy. justice he will rule the truth. He will judge the peoples with his truth. Today is born our Savior, Christ the Lord.
When we start talking about mystical prayer, then we're talking about something else. And it's something we can't do. If we could do it, then we can control God. You see? And there are states that we can get into by our own power, and we need to learn those techniques. We need to know how to be quiet, how to focus our attention. It's like learning how to love someone. There are techniques that help, but they're not the essence. The essence of God and prayer is simply loving God. And the essence of mystical prayer is God loves us so much he begins to act in us in certain ways. And when we get to this area, I think all the mystics would just say, be quiet, don't say anything about it. But know that that's there. There will be a time in your life when God begins to act within you. But you don't have to write a book about it. You don't have to go tell everybody you've had these experiences. If they're true, people will begin to know that there's something different about you without you having to say it. I have a deep mistrust of anybody who tells me I've had a mystical experience. Because normally, and our whole tradition says that, look at how the person lives their life. That will tell you how their prayer is.
So I suppose you can say, yes, we are contemplative in that hopefully if we try to live this life, we at least prepare ourselves or open our hearts or our lives to that grace. Only God can give it, of course. My own experience I can't say that have experienced mystical prayer or anything like that. No, I don't think so. But it seems to me that that's one of the reasons why I chose this way of life, because I wanted that particular dimension of solitude and of silence, which we have here, in which to grow in that prayer life, which I wasn't finding in my years in the active ministry. Now that may sound selfish. Why leaving the service of others in order just to bask in this prayer with God, experiencing contemplative prayer? Well, I don't know. I'm not going to be apologetic, but I would say that even my active ministry in life would not be worth much if there was no kind of interior life going along with it. In the sense, your life of prayer is the soul of your ministry or your apostolate. And so I feel that even here I'm not abandoning my ministry to people, except it's just on a different level and more indirect than direct. But I feel that by any monk seeking to pray and to live a life of contemplative union with God is benefiting the whole church.
Mystical prayer, and I think this is true more than even in the Christian tradition, brings about this transformation in which my life becomes a life for others, where myself becomes less and less and less, where my ability to give myself to others becomes more and more and more. And that's happening because I'm taking this time just to be quiet, to be alone with God, without words, just being an open space within my own heart in which the love of God can begin to act. And that's the role of prayer in the monastic life. We have immense spaces in our day for brothers simply to be quiet, be in the face of God, be in the heart of God, be quiet in the midst of this beautiful nature which God has reflected, just to be quiet so we can begin to listen to God.
Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply, echoing their joyous strains. Gloria,
They used to say if someone is shy, One of the monks is shy, kind of afraid of people a little bit, make him guest master. This way here, he has to deal with people. He has to come out of himself, and that's helped me in many ways. I've had times where I didn't want to talk to anyone, alone myself, never mind guest. And that's really beneficial, I think, for me to have to come out of myself and think of others, because we're supposed to treat all guests as Christ, and it's not always easy to do, but I think it's a great help to me being guest master in that way. Of course, there are difficulties, guests coming. At times you would rather not talk to guests, coming at odd hours. I'm on call 24 hours a day. I'm supposed to answer the guest bell all the time. Sometimes I will hide in my room, but that's the way it works. I think that's the good part of the monastery. The guests, if we didn't have the guests, we would just be here doing our own thing. People, when they come here as guests, they only see the romantic part, the nice side, the beautiful singing, and the camaraderie amongst the brothers and so forth. And that's all true, but we also have to live this life day in, day out. I think people don't see kind of like behind the lines type of thing, what goes on in a monastery. First of all, we're a family of monks here, and we live with each other 24 hours a day. And so it's you have to bear each other's burdens. Like, people work out in the world, they have a job, 8 hours, they go home, and they don't have to see them anymore until another 12 hours. While here, we're here all the time. And I think when guests come here, it sounds so beautiful to them, but they only do it for a few days, a week. But we do it for the rest of our life.
During the first periods when you come here, yes, you're caught up in the romanticism of this place, and that's God pulling you. Yeah. And when you really settle in, God tests you, and that's when you begin to feel much of the dryness. Like, I can't speak for Ben, but for myself, much of my postulancy has been a period of dryness, and that's part of the territory. As Christ said that we are healed by His wounds, and that means suffering much of the time, or some of the time. And
yeah, I know a little bit of the dryness he's talking about. I've gone through, like, probably the entire month of July was a period in which I couldn't, my mind was constantly going everywhere else, even during Mass, thinking about my work, or thinking about home, or thinking about the birds that are flying through the windows there. And your mind is just not on the liturgy, and it's not on your prayer. And,
yeah, so sometimes it can be monotonous, but
people often say...
Yeah, as Prior Philip always tells us, though, as long as we've got our heart set on God, that's the main goal of this way of life.
Yeah, if you're meant for it, you will persevere.
The life always, as any life, in marriage or single state, whatever it is, has its difficulties, its struggles. In our own culture, probably one of the hardest things is just commitment and sticking with it unto death. We make vows for life, for obedience, stability to a particular community, and a conversion of life or growth in the monastic life. And it's not always easy. There's plenty of difficulties, living with others, our own weaknesses, our own inabilities, frustrations, boredom at times. But overall, boredom is something I've never really been in the monastic life after 19 years. There's always plenty to do, always enough to keep me interested, things I want to pursue, either reading or study or craft work, things like that I don't have time to do them all.
I think the one big fear would be coming here and falling asleep. I voiced that to some of my colleagues in the Dominicans, in that in the active ministry, when I was in the active life, working in parishes and things, there was always that stimulus from the challenge of the ministry, working with people and their problems and things like that, that kind of could keep you on your toes. And here, everything is so regular that is one of my big fears, that I would fall asleep in the routine or the regularity of the life and become this sort of self-absorbed. So I think that's one of the fears and one of the dangers of this life, is it could become for someone a very secure way of avoiding real life. I think that, on the other hand, the real struggles of this life are not exterior. I think it's dealing with the false self and all the different claims of that false self in your own heart is where the struggle is, and that's what I'm beginning to find out. For example, my judgmentalness, my anger, things like that.
If I had washed your feet, then surely you must wash one another's feet. Peter said, Lord, do you wash my feet? If I do not wash your feet, you cannot.
I think when people begin to wonder about asceticism in our time, and especially for monks, they think of the asceticism of the vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. But Benedictines, and we're Benedictines, don't take the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. We take stability, conversion of life, and obedience. And really it comes down basically to one promise to God and to the community, and that's to stay here and try to live as a monk the rest of our life. And of course, we're expected to live chastely and poorly. Because we don't take the vow doesn't mean we're not expected to live that way. But Benedict would see it really as a focus on living the life. We can't live monasticism if all the brothers are married. We can't live monasticism if the brothers are acting out sexually. And so we don't do that, but not because it's the focus of our life. We don't do it because by not doing it, we can use our energy for living monastic life, for seeking prayer, for going deeper in the inner life. So asceticism in our Benedictine rule is not for the sake of somehow beating the body or chastising ourselves, and it's not even for doing penance. It's to help us focus our lives, to focus on the search for God, and to use all of our energies in that one direction. And it becomes, instead of something that's sad and downcast and sort of sorrowful all the time, something that brings a radiant light from within the monk and allows the light of God somehow to penetrate the whole way we live, and particularly the personal life. And so the monk, as he becomes older and older and older, becomes more and more joyful if he's living the life well. It becomes focused on this. And so asceticism in our type of life is not something negative. It's something that really helps us to go deeper and deeper, and when it's lived well, makes the monk more and more alive and more filled with the peace and the joy and the goodness of God. And then we share that with those who come here.
Sing my tongue the Savior's glory. On his flesh the mystery singing. Love of Christ exceeding. Shed by our immortal King. Destined for the world's redemption. From a noble
There are times, I guess, I feel twinges of guilt, especially in these days when there's so few priests that are getting fewer and fewer in the active ministry, helping people. And why did I leave that to come into the solitude of the desert? And yet I remember a quote from one of the early desert fathers, Evagrius, or a couple of quotes, in fact. And I can't quote them verbatim, but I can give you the gist. A monk is a man who is separated from all, but who is also in harmony with all. And a monk is a man who considers himself one with all men, because he sees continually, or seems continually to see himself in all men. In other words, my own interior struggles are in solidarity with the struggles of all in some way, and that this ministry of my own struggle and prayer life is somehow going to benefit others.
Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God,
have mercy on us.
Lots of people ask us, well, what does your life do? Does it affect anything in the world? Does it have any influence on the culture around us? And when I first came here, I had come from a more active life where I was teaching and involved in all kinds of active ministry. And people objected, saying, you won't be doing anything, you won't be helping anybody there. And the point of our life is that we have to believe that this help comes through prayer primarily, in unseen ways. And yes, we affect the world in ways that will never be able to be measured, ways that will never be able to be seen in this life. And we have to believe that. There are other ways in which we do affect the world, ways that can be measured. We have a guest house, so we touch people there. One monk told me, he said, we're one of the most famous monasteries in the world, in spite of being one of the smallest, because we're well known all over the world. Our habit, which is fairly distinctive, is known in many places. Some of our brothers were traveling in Europe several years ago, and people were able to recognize them from this monastery immediately. Because we are known, even though we're small. We've never been bigger than 10 or 15 people, and yet we're known all over the world. That has an influence that can be measured. The danger would be for the monk to think that's what it's about, just to influence the world that way. Instead, the influence comes from our own faithfulness in inner life of prayer, praying for people, praying for the world, praying for situations, praying for peace, praying for reconciliation, and that can't be measured. Can't be measured and seen by people.
Take delight
in His command.
Happy are those who fear the Lord,
who take delight in all His commands. Their descendants shall be powerful on earth. The children of the upright are blessed. Wealth and riches are in their homes. Their justice stands firm forever. They are lights in the darkness for the upright. They are generous, merciful, and just. Good people take pity and laugh. They conduct their affairs with honor. The just will never waver. They will be remembered forever. They have no fear of evil news. With firm hearts they trust in the Lord. With steadfast hearts they will not fear. They will see the downfall of their foes. Open-handed they give to the poor. Their justice stands firm forever. Their heads will be raised in glory. The wicked shall see this and be angry, shall grind their teeth and pine away. The desires of the wicked be to do. Glory be to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Take delight in His command.